over the past 18 months. And then when I flip it to Nikki, we'll be talking a little bit about our pipeline. Just a reminder to everybody that that's just a plan to move forward. We think we've got some good stuff there, but a lot of unknowns. So that's basically the idea this morning. I think we can knock this out in about 25 minutes, Matt, if that's good. So I'll go ahead and share my screen here. Not as used to this with Zoom, but give me 1 second. Let me see if I can get over to, okay. And let me see here since, oh, there it is. Can you all see this? And then let me go ahead and present. So how does that look, Matt? Is that good? All right, great. I'll go ahead and get started. And again, thanks for having us. And I'll take, if we can hold questions until the in between before I introduce Nikki, and then we'll take questions at the end. That'd be great as well. So again, good to see everybody. Happy Monday. So at the City of Asheville, we have certainly recognized, as probably many of you have, that affordable housing can be a difficult and complicated thing to achieve at public and private and nonprofit side of all of that. So we've tried to recognize that and also recognize that a lot of this has to do with numbers, that it really is a numbers game that we are looking at here, a balance sheet, a pro forma for the developer, no matter who the developer is. Can they build pencil? And is it possible to do for all types of developers? So certainly recognizing that that can be tough, especially with some of our construction costs right now. And then when it comes to kind of how we look at affordable housing and the challenges, I think it's fair to say that most wages, salaries, and incomes we produce in our area don't support the average housing cost in Asheville, both rental and home ownership. So really from a public sector, a healthy, affordable, mixed income community needs a variety of housing types at a variety of price points, both home ownership and rental, for the variety of incomes and wages produced in Asheville. So, you know, if you're doing great and making $100,000 a year, there should be a housing option for you. If you're working in a local restaurant or managing a retail shop or working in a hotel, we should have a housing option for you. So that's really where we look at our role with affordable housing. And of course, right now in Asheville, we seem to have a mismatch, not only between lower and stagnant wages with high housing costs, both homeownership and rental, but also a supply and demand issue as well, where we have a low supply, a high demand of people who want to be here because of the quality of life. So we've got a little bit of a mismatch going on with both of those areas. And then, of course, you know, the kind of the regular definition of affordable housing from HUD, the clerical kind of definition is that households, both rental and home ownership, should not spend more than 30% of their gross income on housing costs. So if you're a renter, this includes rent and utilities. If you're a homeowner, this includes mortgage, insurances, and taxes. The more we spend on housing, the less we have to spend on life's other necessities, as well as supporting our local economy. And affordable housing has a lot of issues to it, but one of them is it's an economic issue, an economic development issue, that if we're really strapping people with high housing costs, they don't have a lot of money left over to support their local economy. Something that we're trying to do a better job of aligning housing costs with overall household incomes. So as Nikki and I have worked on a lot of this, we're trying to do our best to simplify, you know, what clearly is a pretty complicated problem. So a couple of things that we tried to recognize as kind of our role and what we could do. So first off, the Urban Land Institute talks about a lot of challenges in Asheville, but really those top 9 are challenges across the country: cost of capital, materials, NIMBYism, government regulations, et cetera. Of those top 9, land prices for sure are a struggle in our area. We've seen acres in downtown, close to downtown, central business district, go for $2 to $2.5 million. A couple other challenges for Asheville, not as nationally recognized, are topography challenges, market challenges, like we talked about, that supply and demand, because so many people want to move here for this quality of life, and also what we talked about, the lower wages with a little bit of a more of a service and tourism economy, although folks are trying to work on that to make that better. And so then we try to look at, if we recognize challenges, we also want to make sure we've got the data to back this up. So a couple things that came from our housing needs assessment we did about a year ago, kind of a point in time with some checks here. And this one, as an example for data, looking at available homes by price. So speaking to LOTSAR, I'm sure this rings a bell to you all. The lighter blue is from 2014, the darker blue is from 2019. But you can see there's dramatically less homes for sale in some of those lower price ranges than they used to be. And we really feel like a house for sale priced around 275 or less can assist an individual or family at 100% of the area median income. As you can see, we're seeing less and less houses for sale in that price in Asheville or Buncombe County. And then here, also taking a look by income for renters and home ownership. So 5 years ago, you used to see where if you were making 50 to 55,000, there was a good chance that you were going to flip from a renter to a homeowner if you wanted to do so. Now, if you look at the data from some of this data from 2018 and 2019, that's kind of flipped to where it's really, you're seeing people really at the $75,000 household income. You need that type of income to be able to flip over to home ownership if you choose in the city of Asheville. So we've really seen this like home ownership climbing up the income ladder, if you will, that it's getting more and more challenging for folks at or below 75,000, give or take. Also, we wanted to take a look at some rental here. So, of course, our vacancy rates. The last we checked this in December of 2020 for market rate apartments, there was a 5% vacancy rate, which is considered pretty healthy. There's a good market balance there. But of course, if you look at affordable apartments, that vacancy rate always stays around 0%. We just had one of our team members, Angelica, reaching out to some apartment complexes with affordable units. No one had anything available right now. So that always has a 0% vacancy rate for the most part. And then we also try to look at the rental of like who's cost burdened and how that affects individuals and families as well as your household budget. But nearly half of our renters are cost burdened, and that's paying more than 30% of your income towards housing. And about 1/5 of renters are severely cost burdened, paying more than 50% of their income towards housing. And then, of course, rising rents annually since 2014, about a 5.2% annual increase. So if you were paying about $1,000 in 2014 for rent, you're probably paying about $1,350 now, depending on how all of those numbers work. And so part of our work at the city is to try to balance, like I said, the household cost with incomes and wages, just to try to better align those so people aren't cost burdened at all. And then again,
And Paul,
yeah.
this is Nikki. We just had a question come in, so I'll be your moderator. But someone was asking what is considered an affordable rent in Asheville.
So it depends on family size, whether you're a household, and that's great, Nikki. Thanks for a household of one, two, three, or four. So it depends, but right now, if we could get rents that came in about the $850 to $900 mark, I think that would help out a lot of folks, especially our service workers in this tourism and service economy. And I'll talk a little bit about that in just a few minutes. And excellent, Nikki. That's good. I like that. And so, again, regarding cost burdened, this isn't just a renter problem. Our households also. So, about one of every five homeowners are cost burdened, paying more than 30% of their income towards housing. And about 8% are paying over 50% of their income towards housing. And the for sale inventory, this is really a worry of mine and a real concern of mine that we are losing the home ownership fight here. But we've looked for homes priced under a certain price range. And recently, I think we looked under 275. And we're seeing about 40 units for sale in December when we looked. Of course, it's a slower time of year, but about 40 units that were for sale in the city of Asheville under 275. And we thought about 21 of those were move-in ready. So we're really concerned about home ownership and the opportunity for wealth building in our community.
And this is Nikki again. I just had one question maybe for the group that they can put in chat. So with that number that Paul just shared about the for sale inventory, we were specifically looking at city limits. And I'm just curious if that does ring true, like if we're seeing a very challenging supply of affordability in city limits, and perhaps where you all are finding where affordable homes actually exist. Like if it's further out, is it further out in the county, or if you see other communities that have more of affordable price points. So perhaps think about that. If you want to put that in the chat, that could be helpful to us. So thanks, Paul. Keep going.
No, and that's great, Nikki. And we've gotten calls from Haywood County about thoughts on what they can do about affordable housing. And quickly, quick side note, when I was doing a regional tour of developers, I was up in Johnson City and Morganton trying to recruit more developers to our area just to be a part of the solution. And both those communities were like, what's happening in Asheville? We notice more and more of your people moving this way, to find affordable housing. And again, that's a huge commute, puts cars on the road, affects our infrastructure, adds to transportation costs. So all things that we think about at the city as a public entity. So here are our fiscal year 2020 area median incomes. And when you hear people ask, like, what's the area median income for the city of Asheville? What we usually will say is 72,500. That's, they'll ask to be quoted 4-person household at 100% AMI. So currently, 72,500. That was about a $5,000 jump from 2019. The 2021 figure should be out any day. And we really focus on at or below 80% of area median income. And I'll talk here. So right now, with rent, market rent giving at or about $1,200 a month in rent, everybody in red here could not afford that rent, or else they are going to be cost burdened, spending more than 30% of their income on housing. So as you can see, that's pretty much a lot of folks under 80% AMI can't afford rent here. And a lot of the folks under 80% AMI are all the folks that we know in our community who are working some of these tourism and service jobs in particular. And then here for the mortgage, which I would say the average mortgage for the average price right now, and I might have some questions for you all on this, that comes in at 1625. That even affects even more folks, up to 120% AMI. Someone making 60,000 there at the end can't afford that. They would be cost burdened as a homeowner, which again is not a great place to be for your household income. So this really shows the amount of these aren't just figures, these are individuals and families. We know people making these household incomes here and how they are priced out and struggling for household costs there. So again, kind of taking this back to what we try to do, which is somehow assist with a variety of housing types at a variety of price points here in Asheville and all the types of housing that we can support there on that graphic. We also, to simplify this, tried to identify the city's role in affordable housing. And we can be a funder. We can also offer city-owned land. Nikki will for sure talk about that. Regulatory, you guys might have questions about that, as there's some discussion at the state legislature about regulatory. What can we do there to make it easier for our developers for different types of housing? And of course, a convener collaborator where we take lots of calls from all of our development partners. So we've tried to identify what we can do for solutions on this. We've also tried to recognize the subsidy needed. So if you're an individual or family making below 30%, we're probably going to need $120,000 per unit, rental or home ownership, just to be able to support a family there for housing. For 30 to 60%, about $100,000, and an 80% area median income, about $80,000 per unit. And the way to think of this a little bit is if we're asking people to take $800 rent and it's really market says it's $1,200, and the bank's going to say, hey, it's $1,200, who's filling that $400 a month for 12 months for 20 years? There's where you come up with the subsidy needed to make the numbers work. And those numbers basically can work not only for rental, like I said, but home ownership. And so again, if you're following along here, and Nick will do a good job of summarizing some of this, is that we also looked, again, to simplify it, we're going to invest on the front end with the developer. So we're going to invest on the build, or we're going to invest on the back end with the renter or homeowner. Is that down payment assistance? Is that a housing choice voucher? Something like that. But of course, we can't do it alone. We need our partners, and we also need some incentives and tools. We can answer questions about this, but we've got city-owned land that we could possibly put in play, sell for a discounted price, sell for $1. Housing trust fund, where we're our own bank, where we can lend at favorable terms to make the numbers work, 0 to 2% interest-only payments, 20 years, something like that. Land use incentive grant, which is a property tax rebate on city taxes. So in exchange for affordable housing, we'll rebate back the improvements that you've put on the ground for affordable units. A discount with the Metropolitan Sewer District for the affordable unit. A discount with a lot of our fees, 50 to 100% off, depending on what you give us regarding affordability, and also an expedited review. We do have HUD funds as well, which is home funds, which are basically for the construction of affordable housing, rehab of affordable housing, or tenant-based rental assistance. And of course, we passed the bond a few years ago as well that really has helped out with a lot of the work you'll see in just a minute. We definitely embrace all of our developers, including the for-profit developers. We cannot build our way out of this affordable housing struggle with just mission-driven tax credit and nonprofits. We need everybody at the table. Nikki and I did a little back of napkin that if all the for-profits for 4 years from like 16 through 19 had done 20% of their units affordable, it would be an additional 419 units, give or take, of affordability. So that's not a ton of units, but that's 420 more than we had before. And again, our goal with our partners to produce, preserve, and protect affordable housing. And then again, some takeaways from what we did in 2019 was, we're going to focus on, with our partners that are already doing the hardest work, under 80%, but particularly trying to help people at 60% AMI, identify the gaps in the partnerships and fundings that we need to support some of these folks. The call on for-profit developers and lenders to be a part of the solution, and kind of build a community coalition and bring more partners to the table. And then this is kind of the world that Nikki and I live in, where, who's the developer partner? What funding source do we know of that's in the community already that could help that developer with their mission of affordable housing? What incentives do we have at the city that could make those numbers work? And what area median income are they targeting? 60, 80, 100%, homeless, rehab, preservation, permanent affordability. So that's what we try to look at this chart and match our partners. Nikki?
It's Paul, yeah, we had a question come in the chat, and maybe a good time to focus on that with the slide. So I'm curious about the incentives that you went over as being marketed to developers, and how, this is from Jordan, how can I as a realtor help? And so I'm sure there's a lot of ways we can talk about how realtors can really assist with helping to see these incentives get further prominence. You want to talk about that and about how you see it from your perspective?
Well, quickly, they definitely, anybody who's a developer who's interested in offering some level of affordability, you can always have contact myself or Nikki to go over this. And our role not only as funder, incentives, but also convener, collaborator. And then we're in the middle of updating our website, so it's a little bit easier for everybody to find these tools online. What we did with these tools a couple years ago is really focused on making these tools simple, usable, and equated to money. We found that developers were, hey, it's great you have a policy, but they really want to know the number that they can plug into their pro forma. So we develop policies that are like 6 pages, give or take. It has parts where you can figure out your subsidy amount, put that in the pro forma, and see if you can make those numbers work. And that has worked for us because that's really what the developers want to know. We could always put a glossy 20-page policy together, which would be great, but we really want the policies to be simple, usable, and equated to money. So hopefully you can reach out to Nikki or I, or the city's website, set up a meeting with us. We'd be happy to work with anybody. We get those calls every week trying to recruit more folks to be a part of the solution. And so quickly, I'm going to go into what we've been working on the ground so far. Probably a lot of you folks, and I'll go quick here, have seen Lee Walker Heights. The rebuild there in partnership with the Housing Authority and Mountain Opportunities. We were a funder, convener, collaborator here. We put about $4.2 million to assist with those 212 units at various levels of area median income. There's folks moving in there right now. Nikki and I actually had a chance to see it up close and personal last week. It looks great. A tax credit rebuild where they'll have at least 30 years of affordability if it's the housing authority. So of course that should go further. We probably need to update this picture because it's come even further than this, but what it used to be as they were clearing up that site, and then you're really seeing the apartment buildings come together for 212 units of affordable housing. 360 Hilliard, this is really exciting. This is a for-profit developer. We used a couple tools here, not only housing trust fund loan, but also a land use incentive grant, that property tax abatement. And Nikki, city-owned land here, and we were able to put a deal together to get 34 of their about 80 units there are going to be affordable, long affordability period, and different levels of AMI. And again, that's at the corner of Hilliard and Klingman. So that's come up even further. Amaranth Apartments, any of you that are familiar with tax credit developments, we really support those. Tax credit developments with the North Carolina Housing Finance Agency. We always want to be at the table for those, but of course, we really only get about one in our area each year, maybe two, but we were there for this one with Housing Trust Fund loaned, as well as some of those HUD home dollars. Again, different levels of area median income. Usually tax credit developments have a 30-year period of affordability at minimum, and a nice investment there. And that's Amaranth Apartments within the city limits.
And Paul, we've had another question come in, so maybe this is a good time to address this. So talk about monitoring and enforcement. So Diane is asking a question: what is in place to ensure and enforce that the developers actually meet the number they commit to? Generally, she says it appears that they manage to always cut a few out. So maybe you could talk about what we do in terms of monitoring compliance, some of the deed restrictions that we use, and other mechanisms to really enforce that developers meet the numbers, the length of affordability, and the rental rates that they commit to in some of these agreements.
So it's a great question. Of course, Nikki mentioned the deed restriction that's going to go on these properties. So if there's city money going into these of any type, there's going to be a deed restriction that talks about those affordability and those units. And those partners can't get a CO, a certificate of occupancy, until we verify that those units are all in place, the affordable units are in place with those targeted AMIs. We really haven't had a problem with that ever going to CO, certificate of occupancy. And then it's our commitment at the city to monitor those projects once a year to make sure that those units, those affordable units, are still occupied with individuals and families at those targeted AMIs, those area median incomes. And we do try to keep that monitoring pretty easy on our partners. If it's a tax credit development, like the Lee Walker Heights or that Amaranth, we know that NCHFA is really doing the hard work there on that North Carolina Housing Finance Agency. But there's others like the Hilliard one that hasn't gone to CO yet that, we might do a little bit more work there to make sure when we do the check once a year that the individuals and families at those lower wages and incomes are in those units. And then there's always a possibility to rectify within 60 days if there is a mistake. But for the most part, we've seen compliance. People want to do the right thing. And we've tried to be a better partner on that to make sure we're there. So hopefully that helps a little bit with that question between deed restriction and our own monitoring. And just so you know, we're not perfect. We're trying to get better at that. And so we want to make sure that we are ensuring that the correct AMIs are in those units. Great question. Next one here is Tribute Companies. This is a for-profit developer that's building about 500 units between Ashland and Cox Avenue. Heavy investment here, but we're going to get about 50 units at 80 and 60% AMI with some accepting of vouchers as well for 20 years at a great location on Cox Avenue, close to downtown. We're looking at possibly doing a preference for downtown service workers here. And so we're really excited. That's kind of our first foray into land use incentive grant, specifically for an urban build like that. So excited to see what can happen there. That dirt is moving. We should have a picture soon, but I'm seeing a building. They're going a bit vertical. And then that's from McMillan, Pazin and Smith, some of the architecture of what that will look like, Ironwood Apartments. Habitat, these are where I might flip some questions to you all with the struggle for home ownership, but this has been a great partnership with Habitat, a housing trust fund loan for $860,000 to kind of galvanize their work to have it move a little bit faster. So 8 homes have come out of this for sale under 80% AMI, and they always try to do under 70 and 60. Numbers are getting tough to make it work, but very excited. They've done some great work, Andy at Habitat, and it's great to see support for home ownership as we try to do support for both rental and home ownership. And overall, as a recap, in this last 18 months, about 373 units of affordable housing, targeting all different levels of area median income between 30, 50, 60, and 80, including some home ownership. Looks like a city investment, tax dollars of about 13 million and about $35,000 per unit in subsidy from the city, which is our target. Nikki's going to do the work plan there, but that's a stop for us. And just see if y'all have any questions, or Nikki, is there anything in the queue?
Looking good. And I'm happy if anybody has a question they want to come on mic for and ask. But yeah, I think it's a good time to stop for questions. So as you can see from Paul, this is a sharing out of really some of the things that we've accomplished. And that investment that you saw was really the city's investment, because what it is it's leverage. So it's a leveraged city investment that, of course, accompanies either traditional bank financing and some of those for-profit examples, or state financing with the North Carolina Housing Finance Agency, as Paul mentioned, on some of those tax credit investments. So really, it's a leveraged city investment to help accomplish those goals, where the city invests probably a small degree of the true amount of what it costs to really takes to build those larger apartment complexes.
So
Great.
quickly on top of that, I don't know if there's a question there, but quickly, if we recognize that there's an $80,000 to $100,000 subsidy, the city kind of wants to be at the table to meet that developer or homeowner or renter halfway somehow. So we're at the table. If it's 80,000, can we come up with at least 40,000 to be a part of the deal? And what we've seen is we're doing okay. We're trying to protect city dollars. We're still coming in with a heavy investment, 35,000 per unit, but always trying to be at the table in those conversations to fill that subsidy, make that pro forma work for the developer of all kinds, and then add some more affordable units.
Hey there. I have a question.
Sure.
Well, thank you both so much for presenting this information in such a succinct and palatable format. I really appreciate that, Paul. And just thank you both for the work that you're doing. This is very important and a strong interest of mine. So as a realtor, I'll just say I work with a lot of folks who wind up being able to afford homes, and we get them into home ownership. But I work with probably so many people, especially right now, who can't, and that winds up not becoming an option for them. And it would be so helpful to have some information on these units you have up on the screen right now, Paul. I don't know where you are in filling slots in these places right now. This is the first I've heard of some of these projects, but some resources I could send to those folks and say, put in an application. This is an area that might have a space for you. How can we get that info?
So that's a great question, Jordan. Two things quickly. Number one, each year the city, in partnership with LOTSAR, by the way, and your affordable housing division, we print out and come up with a PDF of affordable units in and around Asheville and Buncombe County. And we really work with partnerships. Matt's been at the table. Rachel Brown is great. And you guys actually in partnership help print those out for us and pay for that. So there is that guide that I can share with you all, because if we can't get folks into home ownership right away, can we do a better job of aligning folks' household costs with their overall household budget? At least we can start there. Regarding these units, we can send some information. These, I don't think any of these made this year's street sheet, because we worked on that in January, but Lee Walker Heights is a part of the Housing Authority, so they'd have to work through that process. 360 Hilliard, I believe, is about to start application, so I can share. I think their website is literally 360hilliard.com. Because that's what they're going to call the project, probably because that's what we've been calling the project for 3 years. Amaranth is a tax credit property. So they, I think, are about to start taking applications. And Ironwood Apartments isn't there yet, but I would imagine they'll make the list next year. They've got a big 500 units. It's a big lift there, but I'm happy to share the street sheet. Matt, you might already have it, by the way. I don't know if you've seen the final PDF.
And sounds like that's certainly something we can share out. And Athena, I see your comment there that she has a copy and shares it with tons of people.
And 2021 is on its way.
Okay, I was going to ask. I haven't seen the 2021 yet.
Yeah, this year, it's great. Starting in November, we start sharing it with the community like, hey, what are we missing, guys? Is there a new development where we forgot? Everyone gives their feedback. And then this year, I think the only delay is we're printing it in Spanish. And so we're waiting on that. Actually, I wrote that down about an hour ago to check in with our Cape department about the Spanish version. So it's coming soon, but I think I've already shared 2021, but Matt, I'll resend that to you, as well as some information on 360 Hilliard, and I'll try to find out information on Amaranth.
Yeah, we'll post that on the LOTSAR website.
Great. Yeah. Any other questions?
Yeah, I have a question. I was wondering, I used to live in Boulder and in other places in Colorado, and they had a pretty serious program to get into home ownership, where you actually had to go through a program, and then every development that was built had to provide a certain number of homes at a rate that couldn't, oh my God, I had my second vaccine. I have that brain fog that couldn't appreciate, that's the word I'm looking for, appreciate at the same rate as normal real estate. So they always stayed affordable for, the teachers, for the people we're talking about, so that they could get into home ownership. Is there a program like that in the works for Asheville? Because it feels like we'd be primed for that.
So a couple of quick things there. You may be talking a little bit about inclusionary zoning, which is not legal in North Carolina, where we can require a developer to put some level of their units affordable. However, hopefully you can see from this, we're really trying to incentivize it. And then regarding some of that, like kind of controlled growth and appreciation, right now, Habitat does a great job, but they can only do about 6 to 8 homes a year in the city. Mountain Housing, same thing with their DPA, about 6 to 8 homes. And now we've got a community land trust that's trying to get off the ground. And that's where you'll see some of those restrictions on the appreciation value. So those are our 3 kind of public partners that we're trying to do what we can with, all mission-driven nonprofit folks. So capacity and subsidy can be tough, but we don't have inclusionary zoning in North Carolina as of right now. I heard that rumor has it that Julie Mayfield is going to introduce the bill, who used to be our city council member and now is down as part of the state legislature. Nikki, I don't know if you heard that, but apparently she's going to introduce that to see if we can do something different, which would be great, especially even with home ownership.
And I think it's a great question. And I think this group in particular would probably really understand some of the challenges, because for a while now, we've been working on a down payment assistance program where the city would offer down payment assistance for home buyers. I think what really is challenging that you all can relate to is, okay, you can get that first deal done, right? You can offer this subsidy to the homeowner, and they can then enter into that house with that down payment assistance. The tricky part is really what happens years later when the homeowner goes to sell the property. Then what? Then what is next there? And how do you develop a legal instrument that follows that home or follows that owner in particular to meet all these different needs, right? So in one case, we're saying, well, how can it be perpetuated? How can that house continue to be affordable? So in thinking about how to design the legal framework for having, what legal mechanism is it, the deed restriction or a secondary loan on the property that the city holds. There's things that we've done in the past that have seemed to work, but it becomes really challenging actually when selling the property after that first initial time. So putting that piece together has been one of the biggest challenges with really how to accomplish the home ownership piece. I just have to be honest, that's where a lot of the heavy lifting really comes in, is how to accomplish that. In the past, we have really relied on this idea of a soft second mortgage, that so long as you, the recipient of that initial down payment assistance grant, so long as you stayed in that house, this mortgage would ride on top of your primary mortgage for a very long time, and you would only have to pay it back if you ever sold the property out of your ownership. And that seems to work, but it really, once that happens, if someone does, eventually sell that home, and then all they need to do is just pay back that initial down payment. Well, as you all have seen in our market has grown so much so that as soon as those homes are resold at a later date, they go, out of the affordable system, right? So it continues to kind of appreciate out of the affordable system, which is why you're seeing right now a lot of our emphasis has been on creating new stock, because even some of our naturally occurring affordable housing just continues to turn over because our market is so hot. So again, I think the biggest challenge is just how we do single family, how we do down payment assistance appropriately, where it's fair, where it accomplishes the goals of affordable housing, but also, attempts to work towards more of a perpetual model where those homes can stay affordable in the future. Is it that idea of a shared appreciation where there's perhaps an agreed upon way of arriving at that secondary sale, and that secondary sale would be restricted to an affordable buyer? It's all of those things that really, really become difficult to figure out, because I think part of what we all acknowledge, I'm a real estate broker myself, is that you do acknowledge this idea of this kind of free market. Well, how do you insert these checks and balances into that when you want it to maintain affordability? That can be really difficult. So great question, and really appreciate the question. And it's something that is a difficult nut to crack. Any follow-up on that, Paul? Or I have another question that came through the chat too.
No, just definitely when we finish, I'm looking forward when I go back on screen and can see everybody, just to talk a little bit about those homeownership struggles. So thanks for that, Nikki.
So going back a little bit, Michelle had a question. So what about the maintenance costs for these buildings? And I think this was the time when we were going through some of the buildings that were under construction right now. So talk about maintenance costs for these buildings, and then will city taxes increase for these programs, was the second part of that question. And so my take on this, Paul, and I think you can chime in too, but in terms of maintenance cost, all of that is built in very much of the pro forma phase when these buildings are being developed, when the costs are being fully finalized. Understanding that annual operating cost is key and is critical to understanding what will be the ongoing maintenance costs for these buildings. So when we see that, we're also factoring in how the rental income from these properties, as well as the subsidy needed to cover that gap of the rental income when you subsidize the rents at a lower cost. All of that is looked at in determining the pro forma and having a successful affordable housing tool to insert into the process to make all the numbers work. Paul, do you have a response to that too?
No, this is a good question. All of those good things. And a lot, just be aware that if the nonprofit developer is a part of this, they wouldn't pay the property taxes. And then we will look at that, like as an example with the tribute model on Ashland, that, we've capped the property tax abatement a bit, but they probably will every 4 years. They might see their property taxes go up if it's a for-profit developer. And we'll be looking at that every 4 years, that if, if it's a huge increase and could affect our affordability, we're very welcoming for our partners to come back to the table for any of those discussions, as well as if 20 years is over with and they liked the program, we were good partners, we'd love them to come back to add another 20 years of affordability. And what will that take? So we're really open to those conversations, and I've written some of that into our policies. And then the last thing I'd say is there's a holistic policy on affordable housing that Nikki and I are working on that I never quite get to, but it's like moving beyond the transaction. Because we get this financial transaction, but there's a lot more going on here: gentrification, displacement challenges, and one thing also too is strong community property management and maintenance. It's really important to have that at the table, because we don't want units, just because they're affordable, to fall into disrepair. We need strong community property management and maintenance. And you'll see us talk more about that as some things go through city council, that how important that is for maintaining the building so that people don't just drive by and say, obviously that's affordable housing because of X, Y, and Z. So we're really encouraging some of those things that hopefully y'all will see in about 6 months or so with this holistic approach to affordable housing.
Great. So let's keep going. Paul, we'll just go through, I guess we have about 15 more minutes to wrap it up.
Switch it to you. So the only reason I didn't introduce Nikki at the front is because I like to embarrass her in the middle of this, because she is our new interim community and economic development director. So if y'all can give her a round of applause, our team is so happy to see her leading our team. So it's always great to not only call her a team member, but I'm even cool with calling her boss, because she has been a great leader for us in these initiatives. So I will let her talk about this pipeline. And Nikki, do you want me to just keep going with the slides?
Sure, I'll give you the cue, when to advance. So thank you, Paul, for that embarrassingly lovingly introduction that you gave there. And yes, so I've been working for the city for about 14 years now. And when I started, I came on board as the city's real estate manager. And so what that meant was I managed all of the city's real properties, as well as participated in acquisition of property that the city needed. So I really have a deep background in real estate. And I think it's why really learning a lot about how we use city-owned property for affordable housing has been a strong passion of mine for the past couple of years. So what we're really sharing with you here today is looking forward to the future and what we have coming up. I'm really, giving you kind of an insight into how we do this work, how we get from kind of the tools, the partnerships, and thinking about these projects and really how they come about. So that's a quick snapshot of some of these projects. We may not get through all of them, but I certainly want to give you some insight into how we put these deals together, because I think it's interesting as a real estate agent from that perspective. So, and Paul, if you want to advance, we can talk about 319 Biltmore. And so 319 Biltmore, so this is the site that's the old Matthews Ford site, and it sits right down below, adjacent to Lee Walker Heights. And so last January 2020, the city actually acquired the property from Duke Energy. So that was part of our role, is to acquire the property and manage that process. And then we issued a request for proposals where we put together some initial due diligence on the site. We had some initial surveys, site work, geotechnical, that kind of information that really would help developers understand the conditions on site, as well as some initial community engagement results that talked about what kind of use, what kind of buildings, what kind of products that they might want to see on site. And so really what we got back was a proposal we had 9 different proposals, but ultimately the one from Homes Urban ranked at the top, and they showed a partnership with McMillan, Pasden Smith to do a mixed-use, mixed-income development of about 250 studio 1 and 2 bedroom apartments. And you'll see that unit mix as a result of their market research, where they looked at the downtown, they looked at the proximity to Mission Hospital, where this site sits, to really understand what the market would also demand from this development. So that's where they hit that sweet spot of 250. And with studio 1 and 2 bedroom apartments, they were able to design it in such a way that would allow their pro forma to work. So there is that skill level too from our development community to understand, okay, how can I do this development so that it looks great, it looks nice, it's going to fit with the context of Biltmore Avenue, but also getting that unit mix right so that they can meet the demands of the market, but also design the units such that it fits. So if you think of a downtown area where there's a lot of proximity to, parks, to other services, to restaurants, retail, I think they've designed those apartments a little smaller to really take advantage of being very cost conscious with what they're doing there. They're also looking at doing 19,000 square feet of commercial space. They indicated to us a potential partnership with a group like Mayhec to do some kind of community-based wellness opportunities there, which they really posit as the idea of how to knit together Lee Walker Heights with the 212 units there on the hill with these apartment units as well. So really using that commercial space as an opportunity to knit the two communities together. And so, yeah, Paul, if you'll go to the next slide, you'll see that how we're looking at this from the city's perspective is, okay, what kind of results can we get? So out of those 250 units, at least 50 will be affordable at that 60% area median income. And again, those rental rates will be based upon the amount of income that the tenants receive and their ability to pay. So that will be part of that opportunity. 25 to 80% and for at least 30 years. So again, how we're going to accomplish this in particular, because it's city-owned land and there will be a transaction, is we will deed restrict the property. So even if, I'm sure that you all know that sometimes as apartment buildings, as they get fully built, fully leased up, you oftentimes see a transaction occur after the initial developer has done their work. Well, in this case, it will be followed by a deed restriction no matter what. So that deed restriction will hold that compliance to that affordability, not just during the initial term, but throughout a 30-year affordability period. And so again, with the partnership with MAHAC, we're hoping that the community can address some positive social determinants of health. And in the build, they also have a commitment for the utilization of minority and women-owned businesses in our area to really allow for opportunities for to participate in that construction and use minority businesses in that build. So our partners we list there, Homes Urban, the process, RFP process, and really the resource that we're looking here is going to be that city land contribution. So this is where we would transact and sell the property to the developer for a reduced cost under the deed restriction that it will be used for at least 50 affordable units over that period of time. So that's how that hopefully is going to transact. And we look at, what we do as staff is that we initiate this process in adherence with these council policies and council goals that have been set forth. You kind of see them reflected in the tenor of this deal. But then, of course, it's always subject to the approval of city council. So what we do as staff is really do the heavy lifting to negotiate these kinds of deals, bring the best deal forward, and then once we have that, we'll present it to council for their final approval. So a lot of time and effort it really takes to put these together, and still subject to the approval of city council. But we're really excited about the potential here to partner with Homes Urban and really see where we get on that site. It's a great site close to a lot of opportunities. So having affordable housing in that location alongside Lee Walker Heights, we hope is going to be a great community. So go ahead, Paul, next slide. And I'm seeing a question too from the chat. I think Alan is polling his peers here to see if anyone in this group has ever owned rental properties. So interesting. So the next one, so again, this is just showing you a little bit of what we do in community economic development and what we do as part of our process. So right now, we have a property under contract, hopefully going to be closing in the next couple of weeks. So I'm sure you all, that's a familiar feeling for this group is aiming towards that timely closing. But we put about 21 acres of property under contract about a year ago for a Deaver View purpose-built community. And so we've spent the past year doing analysis on the site itself. So we've done environmental phase 1, we've done a geotech analysis, we've done a survey, we've worked on a topo survey now, a tree survey as well. And we think we're at the point where we're ready to finally pull the trigger and then hopefully purchase that property. This one actually made some news over the weekend because we do have an upcoming council vote on the authorization of the funds to buy this property. That's coming up tomorrow. So Paul will be leading that up with City Council to look at acquiring this property. Now, the vision here is what's called a purpose-built community. So Purpose-Built is a nonprofit, and they work out of Atlanta. I don't know if anyone has ever heard of places like Eastlake. And Paul, I'm forgetting the one in Charlotte, but it's this idea of doing a community master plan that really addresses cradle to career, cradle to college pipeline. It addresses mixed income housing and an education and health focus as well. So it's really a larger community vision that is set to take place on how to transform this area. You see, we've highlighted the Housing Authority's ownership of the Deaver View Apartments with 20 acres and existing city-owned property at Cedar Hill. So to envision going into the Deaver View community, spending time with the residents on visioning what could happen on these sites here really understanding the possibility of reaching this target of mixed income housing. We want to take a look at whether a new Parks and Rec Center could fit on the property and could work within that community and really serve what the community wishes to see. Other elements like that to really, strengthen Beaverview. I think the city also owns that roadway, so we're the responsible party for the Beaverview Road itself. We have transit service there, so there's a lot of other city services. As you probably know, that road width is pretty narrow with just a 2-lane. It could certainly use sidewalks. There's a lot to really think about as we think about master planning a 60-acre site like that. So go ahead, Paul, and we'll just talk about a couple of these more because I realize we're running up on time. So again, like an opportunity to bring a lot together, really strong results for this community, but very early on in the planning process. So I certainly hope that you all keep a lookout for more news about that one. So go ahead, Paul. We'll just kind of breeze through these. I think I have 5 more minutes. So if anyone wants to chime in as we're wrapping up. Another one that we have under contract is property right next to the city's transit station downtown. So again, looking at a closing hopefully sometime in the summer. We're in the midst of due diligence right now. We're doing geotechnical investigations on site. We did an environmental site assessment. So I'm sure, as you all know, with doing downtown sites, there's a lot to really be aware of in terms of environmental and just geotech. So we're working on that actively. The initial thought with purchasing the property was to expand the city's transit station. Again, part of the fascination of being real estate manager for the city is you got to be very aware of opportunities when they arise, and what better opportunity if you're thinking of expanding the transit station than buying the property right next door. So we were fortunate to put this under contract. I think it was over a year ago, and then are looking at how to both expand the existing city transit station as well as build affordable housing on top. So again, just in due diligence now, but when it comes to that, when we start to do the planning on what it's going to look like for this kind of mixed use transit oriented development, there'll be a really strong push for community engagement, community involvement, and working with our existing transit stakeholder committees to really see how we can have affordable housing in this location as well. So we're excited about the future of that potential. Next slide. So yeah, that's 50 Ashlands. Let's go again. Maybe I can just breeze through in these last two. So we have Ashland proposal. So that's a city-owned property that we're hoping to see some affordable housing. There's a lot to really discuss with that one because of the history of the use and its ties to urban renewal, as well as the close proximity to the adjacent single-family neighborhood. So a lot to really work through on whether or not that one's a go. And again, City Council really has the final say on a lot of this. So that one is still very much in review right now to see if we can achieve 42 permanently affordable apartments on that side. And keep going, Paul. I think I have one more and then we might wrap it up. Neighborhood lots for affordable housing. The city does own some small city lots, and so we're working on doing more of working with the Community Land Trust on a couple of these where we are looking at single family. We have one in off of Broadway, and the other one is in West Asheville. So hoping to partner with the Asheville-Buncombe Community Land Trust on building single family there and the land trust model. Next slide, Paul. And I think we'll just come to a close here. One more. And we'll talk about, I think the next slide is the Days Inn. So I'm sure some of you too may have heard about the potential partnership with Homeward Bound. Homeward Bound is under contract to purchase the Days Inn on Tunnel Road to purchase the old motel and renovate it for permanent supportive housing. So people who are in need of housing with wraparound services. So you see that 24-hour support. So Homeward Bound would run a 24-hour on-site supportive case management. It would also have built-in resources such as a space for health, counseling, therapy, other supportive services on-site to really provide the care. I'm sure we can't get into it today, but homelessness is a big issue in our community. So something like this proposal where it's going to serve chronically homeless people, provide them with safe, supportive, permanent housing, as well as the kind of case management and on-site support that's needed is a really great solution to this complex problem. So I think we're out of time, so I think we'll just start wrapping it up with any final questions. But again, we wanted just to share with you all some ideas on just how some of these things come together, the different types of real estate that we get involved with, and just share with you all some of the pipeline that we have for affordable housing. Again, complex issue. I know you all see it every day as you see the market continue to escalate. And so our challenges with affordable housing are real, but it's very necessary. I think as we look toward really strong economic development in our area as well, we want to make sure that we have housing for our workforce. So having a balanced market is something that we certainly are striving towards with the city of Asheville to meet our economic development future in conjunction with our community development future. So I think that's it for time. So I'll turn it back over to our hosts to wrap us up.
Thank you both so much. I did envision there being a little bit of a Q&A period here, if you're okay with that, where people could unmute and just do any final. So we'll begin that now. Feel free, if anyone has a question, unmute and ask away.
I do have a question. I'm a little bit confused on when one is able to purchase one of these units, and if are they ever able to enjoy an appreciation on their money and investment as a normal homeowner would when they sell. I'm not sure if I understand how that process is going to work. Say they're in the unit and they're paying monthly for a mortgage on this particular unit, and they decide to sell in 5 or 10 years. Will they be able to benefit with a profit on their investment of this home?
Nikki, you want me to take that? So with home ownership, right now we're basically talking about, we showed an example with Habitat for Humanity, and we showed an example also with the Community Land Trust towards the end. So Habitat has some of its thing about how a house appreciates and when they can buy that house back at a market value type of thing. Probably more of what you're thinking of as a Community Land Trust. So with the land trust actually owns the land underneath of it, and they do restrict the appreciation to, I think, either 2.2 or 2.5% a year. So in exchange for helping and assisting a moderate or lower income family into getting to a house where the CLT, the Community Land Trust, owns the land, there is a restriction on appreciation, but it's a balancing there to help the family actually be able to build some wealth. Not as much as with what the market is at the moment, especially, but some wealth is built into that with our partners. Habitat and MHO have different parameters about the money that's used for theirs and their appreciation. The CLT is the one I'm much more familiar with.
I can speak to how Mountain Housing works.
Great.
I actually built through their self-help program about 11 years ago. And there was a portion of my home that was purchased. It was aided by another organization. So when I sell my home, there's $10,000 that's a soft second mortgage that if I sell my home as whatever, the area median income calls affordable, if I sell it as affordable, then I don't have to pay that $10,000 back,
right?
Because it's maintaining affordable housing. However, I'd be kind of stupid, as much as my property has increased in equity and market value. I could easily make enough money that $10,000 is no sweat off my back. But I do have to pay it back once I sell the property if it's not sold under that umbrella of affordable housing.
With appreciation, correct, Athena? On that
exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a great example because it shows the conundrum, right? It shows yes, there's definitely options to create wealth using these types of programs. The flip side is that affordability goes out the door. It's now a market rate, market-based house, and it doesn't stay in that perpetual market. It's a challenge, but there is it sounds like that, yes, that vehicle is one that we're very familiar with, Athena. So thank you for that example.
I just have one more interesting article that I just saw this morning regarding developers. And it's happening in parts of the country. I don't know if it's happened here in our area, but developers are selling whole developments to investors who are then turning around and renting out these homes, but they're not affordable by any means. They're really, really expensive. So it takes the new builds off the market for buyers, can't afford them because the developers have actually investors have purchased the whole package, and the rents are so high that people can't afford to even rent. So have you seen that happening in our area yet?
And Paul here, definitely we've seen some of that, and across North Carolina where some folks are swooping in to purchase a whole entire portfolio of rental units. And then if they were taking vouchers or something or affordable, they're moving those into more market rate if they feel like the area is ripe to be able to have market rate. And of course, that leads to gentrification and displacement. You're seeing the same thing for single family homes. If I could figure out a way legally to stop people showing up in the community with cash to purchase a home, like the day is put on the market, and somehow halt the price or the sale, for 30 to 60 days where it could be affordable and get an affordable person. But right now, the money on the street, you have folks coming in with cash for not only single family, but for entire portfolios. California has some laws on the book where like a multifamily apartment complex, if it becomes for sale, like the city has something to where for 90 days or even 180 days, they have to give the opportunity for the city or a partner to purchase it at the real sale price, but do that as an opportunity to be able to switch it to affordable if it's possible.
Well, this article was a result for that very thing, with agents experiencing people coming in and doing cash offers and things selling within the hour, that investors are putting their money and they're losing money in other areas of investment. So what they're doing is buying up houses instantly. And so you're running around with your buyers and they can't afford anything because the cash offer just came in and is, increased the price, sometimes up to $50,000 for a regular $325,000 home.
It's definitely, after we get through your questions, my question back to you all is, I am out of tricks when it comes to home ownership, and I would love to hear from the group about what thoughts you all have. Nikki and I pride ourselves on putting our heads down and getting to work, and hopefully you guys can see from the work, but I'm out of regular and creative ideas on home ownership at the moment. And I think, Matt, you and I emailed about, I think that the average cost for a sale within the city of Asheville for a single family home in 2020, Asheville and/or Asheville-Buncombe County came in at like $350. And we're out of tricks here. So we can talk about that in a minute. I'd love to hear from you all about that. What other questions can we answer though? So I can flip the tables, Matt. So now, does anyone have any interesting or things that maybe we're not thinking of? Because I must say, we get the calls every week for folks looking for housing. They're getting pushed out to surrounding counties. Down payment assistance, we're struggling to get through at the city side because there's, whether they want it to be the appreciation example like Athena brought up, or it's a grant. It could be a $80,000 grant to get some folks into a house, which means we're going to help a lot less folks. We love our partners, Mountain Housing, ABCLT, Habitat, but right now capacity and land and everything, maybe we get 15, 16 houses a year. So we're not sure what to do. And it really bothers me on a lot of levels, not only as a city worker, but we are we are pushing more and more people out of the opportunity to wealth build. And it's really distressing, to say the least, that so few people. But any thoughts? I can give an example down here. I live in Saluda, so y'all can, talk amongst yourself why the community development director lives down in Saluda. But of course, we love it here. But I struggled finding something in Asheville. But we, as an example, Nikki, I think you and I talked about this. We bought this house for what we could afford of $250 a couple years ago, and the house next to us, which is not very different from ours, is listed for $600,000. And I'm like, unbelievable down here in Saluda. And I'm like, oh my God. And I'm waiting to see if it gets snatched up like that. Don't worry, Nikki, not going anywhere. But it's like, goodness gracious, like what kind of, even down here. But is there any creative thoughts, other communities, other states, programs we haven't thought about? And if there's no answer, we can, email us. But I would love to see what we could do to help out some of our, moderate income folks in Asheville be able to wealth build.
Back to Colorado, Paul, can you explain that inclusionary zoning? Is that what allows Boulder to require builders to have affordable housing?
I believe so. I can't say for sure, although we've looked at their market. But basically, with inclusionary zoning, there's several examples of states. But Virginia, like what is it? Loudoun County is probably one of the best examples. Any developer, rental, or home ownership, if they're going to build, 20% of the units have to be affordable. And that's just to do for the pleasure of doing business with Loudoun County. You're going to build 100 single family homes. 20 of those are going to be at whatever the level of affordability is for that community. We don't have those types of laws on the book here in North Carolina. So that's why Nikki and I are trying to find ways to incentivize it.
Right.
I'm wondering, is there any way to speak with the developers who you may suspect may be selling out to these investors for a moral standpoint on how it's going to hurt the city in the long run, and not just the city, all of Buncombe County and all of these counties in our area, Western North Carolina, but just on a moral standpoint, talking with the developers
Right.
to get them to understand the implications long term of how it's going to affect the area.
So, as a public employee for the city, we don't see as many of this smaller transactions that happen. But when we do, I do certainly say, when they're thinking about putting it in the market and they've already got like 2 people that have contacted them about a cash offer, I do, plead as much as I legally can to say, please consider. I'm sure a cash offer is very lucrative, obviously, quick, all that good stuff. But I do ask them, please consider. We have plenty of folks at or about 100 or 80% AMI or less who are ready and qualified, just can't find a home. But we don't see many of those.
And that's an interesting idea, because it makes me think about when the Healthy Built Homes designation was first. I remember being active in local real estate back in the day when that was first created as a way to brand, right, the efforts around eco-friendly housing. And then that really changed some of I think how our homes were built, right? So if you can't legislate it, which is what we were saying about the inclusionary zoning, can you incentivize it through kind of like what your idea is saying? Like, is there a way you can maybe brand it? That's an interesting idea that we may want to, I think it would be a great way to partner too with Land of Sky to think about, is there a way, like if you're buying this $350,000 house, is there a donation that you could give to Homeward Bound or to Habitat or something like that to start to call that moral high ground into being? Interesting. So thanks for that idea. I think that's an interesting one.
Hello, I'm Beth Butler Cohen, and I've got a question.
I guess.
Paul, first I wanted to say thank you. It's a treat to see you in the webinar. And I deeply appreciate what you did for that transaction on Skyloft.
Okay. Do I owe you documents, Beth?
No, not well.
Yeah.
I don't know. I'll find out. But she's taken possession and is thrilled.
That's
So
great.
no, you owe me nothing. Yeah,
Like I said, there's one other one over there that I have to get with legal, and our legal has been out of town, so that's good to hear. That's good, Beth.
Oh yeah. You're off the hook. You're off the hook. So here was an idea that I dealt with when I was doing some investing. I was required, and I don't recall if it was HUD Homes but they had properties they were putting on the market, and we as investors, and I was only doing one at the time, we had to provide evidence or we had to communicate that we were going to occupy that as our sole residence, and that it was not an investment property, nor was it something that we weren't going to rent it. It was going to be our primary residence. And they made us wait to invest in those properties like 15, 20 days, during which time people who needed the opportunity to get into those homes, who were not going to be investors, could put in offers and get those off the market.
Nikki, you have any thoughts there?
Again, I think I appreciate the comment, because I think, especially from a group, here in the real estate profession, like I really appreciate that kind of thinking outside the box, because sometimes I think what's challenging with a regulation like what you're saying, is that often it does conflict with like the traditional idea of, well, no, we want our real estate to be a free market and freely open, and less restriction the better, right? I've certainly been aware of that in the past as being the preferred option, right? Because what you're saying is that we're going to restrict it such that people who are going to be sole occupants have that first right of refusal, so to speak, and that we then tier investors as being that second tier, which I think in some markets that's worked. I think what's challenging here in North Carolina is that because that kind of legislation would have to come down from the state, I think a statewide initiative would have to be granted. But it's an interesting idea, and I think in other places that don't have a similar structure that we have here in North Carolina, where basically the state is responsible for all the lawmaking effectively, something like that has been tried out. Like I'm even thinking of, Florida has differential property tax rates for people who are owner occupiers versus investors. So there's a lot there that could help. And I think perhaps we are getting to the point in North Carolina where maybe there is going to be a change to see some of these things, because affordable housing is now reaching other communities too. But I appreciate the idea, certainly. But I think at this point, we're much more reliant upon the incentive versus like having a regulatory ability like that. But again, interesting idea.
Quickly on a couple homeownership things, the creative thoughts. We have had one developer who's possibly looking at building a bunch of condo units that would not probably be for sale for 2 or 2.5 years. So they kind of threw out the idea, like, Paul, if we set aside 20 of these affordable, could we sign up 20 families who over the next 2.5 years could work on the down payment that would be needed if we wanted to make some of these affordable? So in other words, working with these households totally on the front end. I don't know if that's something that we could manage, but it was a nice thought from the developer. And then there is a group at landed.com. Nikki, you and I've talked about this. It's actually looking at investing down payment assistance to help. It's not in North Carolina yet, but in like 3 or 4 states. So there are a bunch of investors who will say, I'll put the $80,000 in down payment assistance, soft second. And then when you sell your house, you will pay that back with appreciation. Do we want to partner with a group like that? There are for-profit folks, but they're willing to come in and put that large down payment to help somebody get into a house, soft second, it sits there, and then you sell the house 10 years later, you still have to pay those back, but they're willing to come in, with those investors with big bucks that we kind of need for folks.
What, and it's funny because I was just really combing through Glenn's comment in the chat, because it sounds like you're kind of saying a similar idea of creating some kind of housing bond that could be earmarked. This is Glenn's comment, earmarked for affordable housing down payment assistance and open to investors looking for a safe but lower return on investments. Almost like maybe like a specific loan pool, or like a kind of a modified real estate investment trust that focused on housing affordability, where you had investors that were seeking a lower return, and then homeowners, and it kind of perpetuates the same fund. I mean, maybe it's an opportunity to start partnering with Lustar on just looking like, is that something that our community could do? Because I think the challenge there is that the cities, we've done a lot, and we're getting there and making a lot of strides, as you can tell. But I think partnering now with private business is perhaps our next opportunity. And so I think that's why we really appreciate being here today. And maybe there's opportunity for us together to work with you all to really think about if something like that could have traction, to really partner with private industry, and specifically realtors, to just see if there's potential there. So maybe we can follow up at a later conversation, but appreciate all the insight and the ideas today.
Thank you both so much. This has been so informative, and just really appreciate your time.
Thanks, Matt.
I think we just about covered all the bases, and we've gone just about up to our hard cutoff time. So we'll let you off the hook at this point. Thank you so much. And I'll be in touch with you, but it sounds like we can at a minimum put the slides up for people who attended. I'll confirm that, and we'll be in touch with everyone who attended today on that.
We appreciate it. Thank you so much for having us here.
Yes, thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Paul and Nikki. Take care.
Bye.